Yesterday, the crags felt like a refuge from the descending night. Today, they seem more like a prison. There is a claustrophobic quality to the region I had not properly anticipated. The air is rather foul in places as well, between the acrid tinges of sulfur and the wet, earthy scent of half-rotted vegetation. This isn't to say the place is altogether unpleasant. I've enjoyed the lush, unearthly growths of moss and lichen. The presence of rusted red and orange hues adds to the unusual charm of the place. There are also some rather large, thankfully flightless arthropods clambering about in this hidden wilderness. Alas, my traveling companions are not quite so delighted with the strange little bits of natural history that suffuse this place. Both Toby and Charlotte seem eager to get back out into the open, despite the cold and the potential hazards. I can't honestly blame them. There is a certain logic to finding a bit of high ground for better navigation. It's entirely too probable that we've been taking needless detours, possibly going around in circles on at least a couple of occasions. The crags aren't easy to navigate, particularly for would-be explorers like us who are still new to the locale. Even so, the cold doesn't trouble me nearly so much as the aerial threat. The further we proceed into the Drakenbriar, the more likely we are to encounter a hunting wyvern, a predator of sufficient size and ferocity to present a very real danger to humans. Though I have voiced these concerns, I cannot dismiss their counterarguments. Maybe if this were the beginning of summer rather than its end, we would have the luxury of ample time to find our way through this maze. As it is, we may well have to take our chances out in the open. Granted, we will not be entirely defenseless between our camouflage and the chemical draconid repellent. Even so, I'm not inclined to push our luck. As we search for a suitable path onto higher ground, Charlotte has asked if there are any tales of wyverns. Perhaps she is merely being prudent, asking for any information that might be of possible use on the matter. I'm more inclined to believe that she's trying to ease my worries with a bit of distraction. I'm not certain if I should feel annoyed at such coddling or grateful for such care. I suppose it doesn't matter greatly. As it turns out, there is indeed a story of Oddvar dealing with a wyvern. Honestly, though, it seems more far-fetched than most of his other tales. It was a misty evening when Oddvar got lost in the twisting forest. For hours he wandered aimless and hopeless beneath the thorny boughs. He thought to himself how unfortunate he must be, as briar and thorn tore at his already tattered cloak, though at least he was alone, or so he had supposed. This happy thought was quickly ended as a creature emerged into view. Great wings unfurled, revealing a monstrous form. Blazing eyes regarded him as a maw of daggers opened in a deep, rumbling laugh. A wyvern had appeared, seemingly from nowhere, and Oddvar knew it meant to have him for supper. Thinking fast, he retreated into a thicket, though it felt more like a cage as he peered out at the monster. The wyvern, for its part, was not impressed. It stepped closer, leering hungrily. "Come out, little one," it said in a voice that dripped with poison. "I see that you are lost. Come out and I will ensure that you are never lost again." "I have no doubt you would," Oddvar responded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yet do you not worry I might cause you indigestion?" The wyvern laughed. "I gnaw the very thorn trees down for my own amusement. There is no barb you might conceal that would do me harm from within." "Then let me at least warn you of the barbs I carry hidden away. What harm? Your meal will only be delayed a little while. After all, a struggling prey tastes all the sweeter, does it not?" The creature considered, then crouched low, its wings wrapping loosely about itself. "Then struggle, little prey, and let us see if it improves the taste of your marrow." With that, Oddvar began to enumerate a number of hidden knives and axes, a catalogue of subtle poisons, and various other devices. In answer, the wyvern declared for each one that it would not hinder its meal. Minutes passed, and the myriad tricks and traps grew ever more improbable, becoming altogether absurd. This only seemed to amuse the wyvern, for a while at least, but soon enough it began to grow impatient. So it declared at last, "Enough of your lies. They will give you no refuge, and neither will the cage of thorns you have set for yourself." The creature lunged forward, tearing the thorny branches aside in a fleeting moment. It seized upon Oddvar's tattered form, and its jaws closed upon cloth and empty air. For you see, all the while he had been speaking, Oddvar had also been slowly and quietly moving. He had slipped out of his cloak, leaving it standing upright, held in place by the briars about him. Step by step he had slipped quietly away, throwing his voice by an old trick he'd learned years before. So when the monster thought to take him, it took only a spare cloak. Yet Oddvar was a generous sort, and he thought it only fair to leave a gift for the wyvern. He had left within the cloak a number of dried leaves, a precaution he always sewed into such outer garments for just such an occasion. While such leaves could never poison a wyvern, they did taste incredibly bitter. So the creature was left thrashing about in a blind rage, trying to claw the horrible taste from its mouth. As for Oddvar, he ran away and managed to get himself mostly unlost. Even so, he lamented somewhat, as he now had only one cloak to wear. He would need to have a new spare cloak made as soon as possible. Wyverns can be quite terrifying. We have returned to the dubious safety of the lower crags, with something of a clearer idea of just where we are headed to. This knowledge did not come without significant risk, though it was probably worth it. As Charlotte is remarkably at home in wild places, it didn't take us too long to find a path upward onto one of the many ridges within the area. We crept along slowly and steadily, glancing regularly towards the sky. The slightest hint of a shadow, and we hunkered down under our camouflage. I can't help but wonder if the tattered patchwork robes Oddvar is said to have worn might have been a similar form of concealment. The view from above was spectacular despite the worries. We could see for quite some distance, though many of the low places were veiled in fog. Still, we managed to get our bearings rather well, and things seemed peaceful enough. Then, as we drew nearer to a lonely promontory of jagged rock, Charlotte came to a sudden halt. Toby and I did the same, of course, and I risked a low whisper to ask what had made her stop. She nodded meaningfully towards the rock formation ahead, whispering back that it felt off somehow. Though she couldn't say just why, there was the definite feeling that we must not get any closer to it. It was around this moment that a large shadow passed overhead. Thankfully, we were already motionless and about as concealed as we could reasonably hope to be out in the open. I was about to look up at the predator above us when my attention was abruptly drawn back to the rock that Charlotte had been so wary of. Much to my surprise, it was moving. What had seemed like lifeless stone began to spread out into two great wings, revealing a prehistoric monstrosity. It had a vague resemblance to a theropod, though honestly, it felt more like something that would consider most theropods to be an afternoon meal. Thankfully, its attention was focused upon the creature flying above us, likely a rival entering its hunting territory. The beast took to the air with a few powerful wing beats, letting out an echoing roar. As the two titans began their airborne skirmish, we began moving towards lower ground as fast as we could manage, without drawing too much attention. Looking back, I suspect that the wyvern's wings might have some form of chromatophore similar to what is seen in chameleons. Then again, their dorsal surfaces might simply have an inherently drab coloration. There were also a number of odd thorny protrusions on the wing membranes which I suspect might have added to their camouflage. That, or they could serve as protective structures for navigating through thorny territory while on the ground. Plenty of mysteries about the creatures, and most who've tried to look into them have ended up on the wyvern's menu. Leaving such questions aside, we are now drawing quite close to the inward boundary of the crags. The air has grown heavier and more humid. If we keep to our current course, we should reach an outpost at the edge of the twisting forest before nightfall. Within the Drakenbriar, one region in particular stands out as having an especially verdant ecology. The twisting forest is a large expanse of lowland vegetation shrouded in dense fog. Its nearest equivalent in mundane reality might be something like the temperate rainforests seen in certain coastal locales. This ecosystem has quite a few differences, though. To begin with, the trees here are almost universally lycophytes. They tend to grow in a distinctly contorted pattern, giving the forest its name. There are also a number of tree fern varieties, along with abundant bryophyte and lichen growths. The lichens in particular sometimes grow to the size of small trees, though they are routinely overshadowed by their neighbors. There is a dense community of specialist epiphytes covering nearly every available surface, giving the forest a rather spectral appearance in the omnipresent haze of mist. The often soft and fuzzy appearance of the epiphyte growths conceals a multitude of hidden thorns growing from the underlying trees. Studies indicate that these thorns are derived from the microphyls seen in more typical lycophyte species. While the local flora are remarkable enough, the fauna make the twisting forest particularly unique. There are a multitude of large arthropod species, most of which are generalist herbivores able to feed on the local vegetation with relative ease. The larger animal niches are almost universally filled by the draconids. These creatures are theorized to be descended from the mammal-like reptiles of the late Permian era. If so, the Drakenbriar might well have functioned as a refuge during the Permian extinction event. Whatever the ancestral forms might have been, the modern draconids are a varied group that includes the infamous drakes, wyverns, and lindwyrms, as well as a number of other smaller species. Despite the broad variations in body plan, the draconids have at least a few common qualities. They all have an omnivorous habit tending towards carnivory, though they will also readily engage in opportunistic scavenging. Their features appear to hold an almost even blend of reptilian and mammalian aspects. Most of the known species stalk through the undergrowth of the twisting forest in search of suitable prey, and end up falling prey to each other as often as not. At last, after many hours wandering through the crags, we've come to an outpost at the edge of the lowland forest. Still sheltered by rock, still half hidden away, but only a short distance from open ground. Well, open in a geological sense at least. One could hardly call such a forest an open place. This outpost is unlike the monolithic fortresses we've seen before. Instead, it consists of a few small buildings perched on cliff edges tucked away among the crags. Many of the rooms are carved out of stone rather than constructed. A number of fortified fallback positions in the event of possible attacks. Honestly, the whole place has an improvised feeling about it. Being one of the smaller outposts, there was no regular staff present this late in the season. In fact, only 2 other people were staying there, and they seemed to be nearly as odd as our own little trio. As I sit writing this entry, the 5 of us are passing the evening hours together in one of the larger rooms. One of the unusual pair is quite young, while the other is probably almost as old as Toby. This older gentleman seems to be a veteran explorer. He's dressed in worn, almost ragged garb, and has a number of tools and devices on his person. He goes by the nickname of Scrimshaw, and there are suggestions of a nautical background in his various quirks and idioms. He also has an almost rusted quality, though his eyes seem quite sharp. His mode of speech is at once precise and eccentric, with a subtle accent that would almost suggest some sort of aristocracy. That said, his demeanor thus far has been rather familiar and his banter somewhat uncouth. Charlotte has enjoyed swapping stories with him, and the 2 appear to have fallen into a contest of what amounts to a series of dirty limericks. This seems to have put the younger of the pair somewhat ill at ease. He goes by the name of Jack, a fairly common pseudonym. While Scrimshaw has the air of a veteran, Jack seems to be very much the opposite. Honestly, he looks almost too young to be venturing through a biome like this, but if he's made it this far, he must have some skills. His attire is just about as tattered as that of his traveling companion, and I suspect the 2 of them have had a few rough scrapes during their time here. One might wonder why I'm going into such detail writing about these 2. In truth, I think I'm trying to figure them out. According to Scrimshaw, they came here initially with a considerably larger group with the intention of exploring the deepest habitable region of the Drakenbriar, the place commonly referred to as the Hell of Thorns. Apparently the others in the group have lost their nerve after a few ventures into the twisting forest. They departed a couple of days ago, leaving these 2 short on both time and options. So, of course, when Toby mentioned we were heading into that region, Scrimshaw immediately seized the opportunity and suggested a bit of collaboration. While I don't like the idea of traveling with strangers, there is a certain sense to the plan. The deep Drakenbriar is not a safe place by any means, and there is something to be said for safety in numbers. Wyverns are dangerous enough, but the greater threat in the forests is likely to be the Lindwyrms. They are slender, serpentine creatures, quite capable of moving at remarkable speed through dense undergrowth. By all accounts, they are also very ill-tempered, or at least not averse to dining on humans. Perhaps I should try telling my new traveling companions one of the old tales where Oddvar encountered a particularly unpleasant Lindwyrm. When Oddvar visited the twisting forest, he did so with some trepidation, yet there were herbs to be gathered and wood fit for carving, so he wandered deep into the forest, deeper than perhaps was wise, onward to the very edge where the sky was stained with ash and the trees grew ever more contorted. It was here, near the boundary to the broken lands, that he saw the Lindwyrm. It was a large creature, coiled up on the path like a great serpent. It regarded him coldly, smiling as its claws tensed against the ground. It spoke in a smooth, cultured voice. "You've walked a long way, stranger. Where do you suppose you are walking to?" Now, Oddvar knew better than to give a straight answer to such a creature, but it wouldn't do to give no answer at all. So he drew a wooden flute from his cloak and began to play idly, a rambling sort of melody that was not terribly pleasant. The Lindwyrm swayed slightly in time to this questionable music, seeming quite distracted for at least a fleeting moment. Oddvar paused his playing to answer. "I walk where the land falls to rust, and the trees claw the earth. What have you, good sir?" he asked, before resuming playing on the wooden flute. The Lindwyrm looked pleased, perhaps even amused. "I walk not at all, but rather glide along whither I will." "And whither is your will this day?" he asked, between notes. "That depends upon your next answer. Tell me, stranger, why do you wear such ragged attire?" Oddvar shrugged, lowering the instrument a moment as he answered, "Perhaps I am a beggar?" "You seem to be well-spoken for such a lowly state." A few more notes echoed among the trees before he answered again. "On the contrary, a beggar must be well-spoken indeed, or else none would give him anything." "Then, beggar, what would you beg of me?" "I beg nothing of one so austere," he answered with a laugh. "For you would demand recompense in time," he noted before returning to his music. "Would you not even beg for your life?" "My life is mine," he answered, stepping slowly off the path to stand beneath one of the large twisting trees. "How do I beg for such?" "Suppose I were to take it?" "I don't think you'd want my life. Too humble for a lofty creature like yourself." He raised his arms a little. "Besides, my clothing wouldn't fit you, and the flute I play might be too small against your scaled mouth." He leaned back against the tree and resumed his playing. This made the Lindwyrm laugh, though it was a cruel sort of laughter. "You like to stand words on their heads. Do you also stand yourself on your head?" "Ah, I'm afraid my head isn't nearly flat enough for that, Your Honor. I would keep tipping over." "I'm sure I could find a way to hold you securely." "No doubt you could. I've heard of the Lindwyrm's way with thorns. Your larder, so I hear, is a most unsettling abattoir." As he resumed his playing, the music became more somber. "Indeed it is. Perhaps you would like to see?" "A most magnanimous offer, though I'm afraid I must decline." The creature chuckled darkly. "Do you suppose you have a choice in the matter?" "Do you suppose otherwise?" "Indeed I do." As the creature coiled itself tightly for a strike, Oddvar raised a hand and spoke quickly. "If you would withhold for a moment more, you might learn a most valuable secret." Now, a Lindwyrm is a vicious creature, but also a curious one, so even this vague statement was enough to give it pause. Oddvar had only this one chance to escape, and even this was a gamble at best. It watched a while as Oddvar continued playing his toneless little tune. Eventually it snarled impatiently, "What is the secret, little prey?" A final flourish of notes, and Oddvar smiled broadly. "Why, the tune I've been playing all this time. Do you not recognize it?" He turned and drew his cloak up over himself, crouching low against the tree until he looked like nothing more than an especially large clump of ragged moss. The Lindwyrm didn't have time to comment on this strange display before a massive shape descended from above. The Wyvern's talons dug into the scaly hide of the creature as its jaws closed about the Lindwyrm's head. It barely had a chance to cry out before it was silenced by the larger predator. As for Oddvar, he watched in silence, motionless as the winged terror devoured its prey. The flute, as it turned out, was not so much an instrument as a call. He had all the while been making sounds not unlike those of a distressed licare. In other words, a mimicry of prey to any wyvern in the area. A Lindwyrm would normally have sheltered within the twisting briars, slithering away safely concealed from aerial attacks, yet this creature had foolishly stayed in the open on the path, thinking to waylay its own prey. It had been so distracted that it had failed to watch the sky above. The wyvern made a quick meal of the hapless little predator, devouring it bones and all before taking flight once more. If it saw Oddvar at all, it didn't seem to pay him notice. After all, it had eaten quite well already. He stood slowly, watching it fly away into the distance as he resumed his walk along the path. The valuable secret, he supposed, was that sometimes predators might also become prey. It's mid-morning now, and the crags are more or less behind us. Ahead, things are not quite what I had expected. After reading the accounts, I'd imagined an expanse of relatively flat, featureless lowlands covered in a verdant forest and shrouded in mist. The mist part was accurate enough, at least. Most of the foliage here is more brown than green, an autumnal sort of rusted hue. Still, the leaves aren't dry or falling off by any means. That's a funny thing as well. I hadn't expected lycophyte trees to have proper leaves. At a glance they seem to, but it could just be the dense epiphytic populations clinging to their branches. The terrain is still craggy and uneven, with isolated peaks still rising above the mist, yet our current surroundings are far more open than what lies behind us. I can't be sure how this might change up ahead, as whatever the trees fail to obscure, the mist conceals quite effectively. There are distant rumblings in the air like far-off thunder, barely audible yet still unsettling. The sulphurous quality of the air seems to have grown a little stronger, though it is thankfully still relatively subtle. The atmosphere is considerably warmer here, which is just as well given the rising humidity. In colder weather, such humidity would sap the heat away with alarming efficiency. We are now a band of 5 rather than 3. Our heavy fur overcoats have been changed out for lighter cloth, dyed with colors more appropriate to the mottled forest ahead. In place of the sound of wind, the air is filled with the low chittering of largely unseen animal life. This forest is known for many unique species of arthropod alongside the more famous draconid creatures. I saw one of these arthropods beside the path we've been walking, one of the few local species that is capable of flight. No doubt a seasoned entomologist would recognize the precise species, but all I could determine was that it was a wasp. I have reason to hope it could be one of the family Cynipidae, but if so, it was a remarkably large example of the group. If it is as I hope, then this would be a very good sign, considering my primary goal in this little venture.